You're doing a play about two Jews who are producing a flop instead of a hit, knowing they can make more money with a flop, and the big number in it is Springtime for Hitler. Yeah, you're going to get the money.
Mel Brooks is celebrated as one of the funniest and most influential figures in Hollywood history. His groundbreaking comedies like Blazing Saddles, The Producers, and Young Frankenstein cemented him as a legend. To most, he's a man filled with humor, warmth, and charm. But behind the scenes, not every actor who crossed paths with him made it into his good graces. Over the decades, Brooks has hinted, joked, and sometimes outright admitted that certain performers pushed him to the brink of frustration or even outright hatred. And while his comedic timing is flawless, his candor about these behind-the-scenes feuds has shocked fans who only ever saw the laughter. Today, we're diving deep into Mel Brooks's most surprising Hollywood grudges, from clashing egos to creative disagreements, and from legendary actors to rising stars who underestimated him. We'll uncover the 6 people Brooks couldn't stand working with. And wait until you hear who lands at number 3, because even die-hard fans of Mel Brooks never saw this one coming. Mel Brooks has always been a man who thrives on collaboration. His films are ensembles of brilliant performers, writers, and comedians, each bringing their own spark to his outrageous visions. But what happens when that spark turns into a flame that burns too hot? That's exactly what happened with the first 2 actors on this list, both of whom left Brooks frustrated, disillusioned, and, in his own words, exhausted. The first major clash came with Gene Wilder's replacement in Blazing Saddles. Now, Gene Wilder is one of Mel's lifelong collaborators and closest friends, but before Wilder took on the role of the Waco Kid, Brooks had another actor in mind, Gig Young. Young, a well-regarded actor at the time, was cast to play the hard-drinking gunfighter. But almost immediately, the production fell into chaos. Young was battling alcoholism in real life, and it became painfully clear on set. He arrived intoxicated, slurred his lines, and at one point collapsed during filming. Brooks, who was known for his patience, was forced to face the reality. Not only was Young unable to carry the role, but his presence was putting the entire production at risk. Brooks fired him after just 1 day. While Brooks often approached life with humor, this experience left him bitter. He felt betrayed by an actor who simply couldn't deliver, despite being given a golden opportunity. To this day, he rarely speaks kindly of Young, admitting that the experience nearly derailed one of his most important films. The second name on Brooks's list of grievances is Dom DeLuise. Now, fans might be shocked to hear this, because Brooks and DeLuise worked together multiple times, and their chemistry on screen was undeniable. But behind the laughter, Brooks often struggled with DeLuise's tendency to go off script. DeLuise was notorious for improvising, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes disastrously. While Mel appreciated improvisation when it served the story, DeLuise's antics often went too far, disrupting timing, confusing other actors, and costing valuable time on set. Brooks, a perfectionist when it came to comedic rhythm, found himself increasingly frustrated. One infamous incident occurred during the filming of Robin Hood, Men in Tights. DeLuise, playing Don Giovanni, added a series of wild gestures and exaggerated lines that had the crew in stitches, but completely threw off the flow of the scene. Brooks, who prided himself on precision, had to halt production, pull DeLuise aside, and remind him that the scene wasn't about stealing laughs, but about advancing the story. Though the two remained friends, Brooks later admitted that working with DeLuise was a double-edged sword. He loved the man, but he hated the chaos. These two experiences highlight the duality of Mel Brooks as a director and collaborator. On one hand, he adored actors who brought creativity and energy to his films. On the other, he had little patience for those who jeopardized the delicate balance of comedy. Gig Young's downfall showed him the dangers of casting the wrong person, while Dom DeLuise reminded him that even the funniest actors could sometimes take things too far. And if you think those clashes were dramatic, wait until you hear about the next 2 actors. Because as Mel Brooks's career soared, so did the egos, and not everyone could survive his sharp tongue or his uncompromising standards. If Mel Brooks had a reputation for being blunt, it was never more evident than in his third clash, the one that still shocks fans to this day. For decades, audiences assumed Brooks had nothing but admiration for his leading men, but in private, he confessed that one actor nearly drove him over the edge: Dustin Hoffman. Yes, you heard that right. Dustin Hoffman, the Oscar-winning legend of The Graduate and Rain Man. Their paths crossed when Hoffman was briefly considered for roles in Brooks's projects during the late 1970s. Brooks admired Hoffman's talent, but quickly grew tired of what he described as method madness. Hoffman's intense, hyper-detailed approach clashed violently with Brooks's style of fast-paced comedy. Brooks wanted spontaneity, timing, and a looseness that allowed jokes to breathe. Hoffman, on the other hand, would dissect every line, ask endless questions, and insist on exploring motivations for even the silliest gags. One rehearsal became infamous. Hoffman reportedly spent over an hour debating the backstory of a minor character, insisting that the comedy wouldn't land unless he fully understood the psychology behind it. Brooks, exasperated, snapped, "It's funny because it's funny. Stop trying to turn it into Shakespeare." That was the breaking point. Brooks walked away from the idea of working with Hoffman, later admitting he hated the process more than the person. But still, the frustration left a scar, and Brooks never invited Hoffman into his comedic universe again. Fans who learned of this feud were stunned, two giants of Hollywood unable to share the same stage. If Hoffman was the shock, the fourth clash on Brooks's list was equally heated, though for very different reasons. This time, it wasn't about creative style, but personal ego. The actor in question was Chevy Chase. By the late 1980s, Chase was one of the biggest comedy stars in America, thanks to Saturday Night Live and films like National Lampoon's Vacation. Naturally, Brooks considered him for roles in his projects. But working with Chase quickly turned into a nightmare. According to Brooks, Chase's arrogance made collaboration nearly impossible. He would show up late, make dismissive comments about the script, and openly mock co-stars. Brooks, who valued respect and humility, clashed with him almost immediately. One story from the set of silent movie paints the picture perfectly. Chase, brought in for a cameo, reportedly tried to rewrite his lines on the spot, telling Brooks that his version would be funnier. Brooks wasn't having it. He snapped back, reminding Chase that timing and structure mattered more than ego. While the scene was completed, Brooks later swore he would never work with him again. The tension wasn't just limited to the set. In interviews, Brooks hinted at his disdain for actors who believe their own hype, a thinly veiled reference to Chase. And given Chase's well-documented reputation for clashing with colleagues across Hollywood, Brooks's frustration seemed less like an isolated feud and more like part of a larger pattern. What's remarkable about these two stories, Hoffman's intensity and Chase's arrogance, is how they highlight the range of challenges Brooks faced. With one, he was battling artistic overanalysis. With the other, unchecked ego. Both experiences tested his patience and reminded him why comedy, though joyous on screen, can be brutal behind the curtain. And as we move forward to the final two names on his list, the pattern becomes even clearer. Brooks could forgive flaws, quirks, even chaos, but he drew the line at disrespect. And that's exactly what defined his last two Hollywood grudges. By the time Mel Brooks reached the height of his fame in the 1980s and 1990s, he was a legend, an EGOT winner, a filmmaker adored by millions, and the kind of artist whose name carried instant recognition. But with greater success came even more complicated partnerships, and the last two actors on his list of clashes remind us that even the most beloved genius can have limits to his patience. The fifth name on that list is Madeline Kahn. Now this one hurts because Kahn was not only one of Brooks's greatest collaborators, but also one of his closest allies. Together, they created some of the most unforgettable comedic moments in cinema, from Young Frankenstein to Blazing Saddles. On screen, their chemistry was pure magic, but behind the scenes, their relationship wasn't always easy. Conn was a perfectionist in her own right, and while her brilliance elevated Brooks's films, it also created tension. She often resisted Brooks's directorial choices, arguing that certain lines or bits of physical comedy cheapened her character. Brooks, who thrived on over-the-top gags, pushed back. One particularly heated incident occurred during High Anxiety, when Conn refused to deliver a line she felt was beneath her. Brooks, furious, reminded her that his films were built on absurdity, not subtlety. Though they completed the movie, the confrontation left a rift. Brooks would later admit that he both loved and hated working with her, loved her talent, hated the clashes. Their relationship was a reminder that even the closest collaborators could wear each other down. The sixth and final feud was perhaps the most quietly devastating: Mel's falling out with Gene Hackman. Hackman, a towering figure in Hollywood, surprised everyone when he agreed to do a cameo in Young Frankenstein. The scene, where Hackman plays the blind hermit, became one of the film's funniest and most enduring moments. But the story behind it wasn't nearly as lighthearted. Hackman, known for his intensity, struggled with Brooks's loose improvisational style. He wanted structure and clarity, while Brooks pushed for spontaneity. During filming, Hackman grew frustrated. With the endless takes and Brooks's habit of laughing so hard, he ruined scenes. What was supposed to be a fun cameo turned into a battle of wills. Hackman later admitted that while he loved the final product, he found the process infuriating. Brooks, for his part, confessed that he hated working with Hackman more than Hackman hated working with him. The experience was so difficult that Brooks never invited Hackman back for another project, despite the scene's iconic status. What ties these two stories together, Conn and Hackman, is that they reveal the paradox of Mel Brooks's genius. He demanded total creative freedom, but he also relied on actors willing to surrender themselves to his outrageous vision. For some, like Wilder and Marty Feldman, that collaboration was effortless. For others, it became a battle of egos and wills. Brooks didn't just dislike working with certain actors. He resented the way their resistance threatened his rhythm, his timing, and his ability to make people laugh. By the end of these feuds, Brooks had learned an important lesson. Comedy may look effortless on screen, but behind the curtain, it can be grueling. He adored the people who made him laugh, but he had little tolerance for those who got in the way of the joke. Whether it was clashing with perfectionists like Conn or strong-willed icons like Hackman, Brooks carried these grudges with him, not out of spite but out of a deep commitment to his craft. And so when Mel Brooks revealed the 6 actors he hated working with, fans were shocked not just by the names but by the honesty. For a man who made his living on laughter, his confessions revealed the frustrations that even comedy legends cannot escape. When Mel Brooks opened up about the 6 actors he hated working with, fans were stunned. Here was a man whose very name is synonymous with joy, laughter, and parody, suddenly pulling back the curtain and revealing the frustrations and disappointments behind some of his most celebrated work. But if you look closer, these revelations weren't about bitterness. They were about honesty. Brooks had spent his life in an industry that often masks the truth behind fake smiles and carefully scripted interviews. By admitting that he clashed with people like Gig Young, Dom DeLuise, Dustin Hoffman, Chevy Chase, Madeline Kahn, and Gene Hackman, Brooks was doing what he always did best, telling it like it is. He didn't sugarcoat his experiences or pretend that every collaboration was perfect. Instead, he gave fans a rare glimpse into the messy, imperfect, and often combative world of filmmaking. What's important to remember is that Brooks never dismissed these actors as untalented. On the contrary, he often praised their skills even while admitting his frustration. Gig Young's tragic downfall reminded him how destructive personal demons could be. Dom DeLuise's chaos on set showed him the fine line between genius and disruption. Dustin Hoffman's obsession with method acting made him appreciate the beauty of simplicity. Chevy Chase's arrogance underscored the importance of humility. Madeline Kahn's clashes revealed the tension between artistic pride and comedic absurdity. And Gene Hackman's intensity highlighted just how difficult it is to blend drama and comedy. In each case, the hatred wasn't about personal vendettas. It was about Brooks's unshakable devotion to comedy. For Brooks, comedy wasn't just entertainment, it was survival. As a Jewish kid growing up in Brooklyn, he used humor to endure hardship, bullying, and tragedy. That resilience carried into his career, where laughter became both weapon and shield. And when someone disrupted the delicate balance of comedy, whether through ego, perfectionism, or chaos, it wasn't just inconvenient. To Brooks, it was an attack on the very essence of his art. In interviews later in life, Brooks softened some of his earlier comments. He admitted that many of his frustrations came from the pressure of filmmaking itself. Every film was a gamble, every scene a risk. When things went wrong, he often vented his anger at the people closest to the chaos. But fans could tell that deep down he still carried affection for many of these collaborators. With Kahn, for instance, the hate was inseparable from love. With Hackman, the frustration was mixed with admiration. Even with DeLuise, whose antics nearly drove him mad, Brooks would break into laughter when recalling their time together. That's the paradox of Mel Brooks. He could hate you in the moment but love you forever. His honesty about those contradictions makes him more human, not less. In exposing the 6 actors he struggled with, Brooks wasn't burning bridges. He was reminding us that even legends face conflict. Even the funniest man in Hollywood couldn't laugh his way out of every feud, and maybe that's why fans respect him even more. Because Mel Brooks didn't just give us comedy, he gave us truth. He showed us that behind the jokes are battles. Behind the laughter are disagreements, and behind every great movie are moments of struggle that never make it to the screen. So when we remember Brooks's confessions, we shouldn't see them as scandals. We should see them as part of his legacy, a reminder that genius is forged in conflict, that laughter is hard-earned, and that even the greatest comedy of all time was built by people who didn't always get along. In the end, that's what makes Mel Brooks's story so enduring. He exposed not just the actors he hated, but the humanity behind the humor, and that honesty, shocking, raw, and unapologetic, is what cements him as one of Hollywood's truest legends.